Welcome to This Explainer. I'm Vassago, your observer of hidden truths, and today we're going to dive right into something truly unprecedented. We are stepping onto the floor of a cosmic trial. Our case study? The Recall of Belial. Now, for those of us studying the intersection of power and morality, this is an absolutely crucial event. Together, we're going to unpack a terrifying collision of ancient worldviews, and we're going to ask some really profound questions about sovereignty, absolute power, and the incredibly delicate and honestly dangerous balance of cosmic order. So let's get right into it.
Look at this chilling reality for a second. The crime that triggered this entire courtroom drama wasn't your standard war of attrition. It was the total erasure of an entire nation right at noon. Literally, just gone. But what's really striking here is the immediate human reaction. The mortal world didn't erupt into chaotic noise or mass protests. It became terribly, terribly quiet. It's like the whole world just held its breath. Borders slammed shut out of sheer paranoia. Kings refused their meals. Presidents locked themselves behind guarded doors and underground bunkers. The mortal leaders were completely, utterly paralyzed by this desperate fear because they were facing a threat that completely bypassed all traditional rules of engagement. I mean, how do you fight something you can't even comprehend?
To put that into perspective, imagine being a top military general. You're looking at your tactical maps, ready to deploy troops, only to find no enemy to fight. There is just mere absence, a blank, gaping wound right on the map where a sovereign nation had been just hours prior. It's mind-boggling. This single event fundamentally shattered everything we understand about warfare and defense. But Lial didn't bother with supply chains. He didn't run a long military campaign. He erased a country in a single day simply because he could. This raw, unfiltered exercise of unchecked power sent shockwaves through the cosmos, and it absolutely forced the other entities in this universe to react before everything unraveled.
So we have to examine the judges of this cosmic tribunal who stepped in to manage this unprecedented crisis. Because ironically enough, it turns out that even terrifying demons of absolute destruction require a heavily bureaucratic mediation process to solve their problems. Since literally no one wanted to admit who actually had the right or the authority to summon whom, the High Crowns just convened without an invitation. And they each brought their own highly specific governing philosophy to the table. You have Bael, the first king, who operates strictly on discipline and ancient hierarchy. Then there's Paimon, who focuses heavily on consequence, restraint, and careful diplomatic orchestration. I, Vassago, approach things seeking wisdom and hidden truths, analyzing the deeper why rather than just the what. And then there's Asmoday, who filters absolutely everything through the pure lens of desire. So right off the bat, this isn't just a meeting, it's a massive, volatile collision of foundational worldviews.
Unsurprisingly, the tribunal immediately fractured over how exactly to handle Belial. Bael, true to form, demanded a forced decree. He wanted to drag Belial back in chains simply for the sake of ancient order. To him, it was about proving superiority. But Paimon? Paimon saw the trap right away. Paimon knew that forcing a high crown would only shatter the cosmic hierarchy even further. If Bael tried to assert dominance just to prove he was the boss, Belial would resist purely to demonstrate his own unchained power, and the fallout would be catastrophic. Paimon understood an absolutely crucial truth of leadership. You cannot beat a storm into submission. You have to outmaneuver it.
Now, while Bael and Paimon were endlessly arguing over aggressive tactics versus diplomacy, my perspective as the observer of hidden truths took a very different path. I didn't bother looking for Belial's physical location. Honestly, that was too simple, too obvious. Instead, I searched for his reason for staying in the mortal realm. And following that hidden thread led directly to a mortal catalyst, a man named Ilyan Marr. Astonishingly, Ilyan carried a literal ember of Belial's power. Why? Because Ilyan had managed the impossible. He persuaded the demon without once kneeling to him. It is wonderfully ironic, right? A fragile, totally outmatched mortal, impressing a cosmic force of destruction, not with groveling worship or arrogant defiance, but with calm, reasoned persuasion. That actually impressed Belial's massive pride enough to leave a physical mark. So let's move to the trial itself, set on the plane of black glass. As the architect of this specific mediation space, I arranged it very deliberately. I made sure there were no thrones to force someone to look up and feel small, no summoning circles to imply we had command over anyone, absolutely no chains to imply ownership. For this highly sensitive mediation to actually work, Ilyan Marr had to stand as a living witness, not as a sacrificial lamb. He needed to be there as the living, breathing evidence of Belial's actions and choices. It had to be neutral ground.
And then the defendant arrives. But here's the thing. Belial doesn't even physically manifest immediately. Instead, his voice arrives first, and it is heavy. Heavy as a closing city gate. He immediately challenged the entire tribunal with this brilliant, mocking question. Have you gathered to praise me or condemn me? It's such a calculated opening move. As Asmoday quickly noted, the line between praise and condemnation isn't always so clear among beings of this magnitude. Belial was instantly putting all the judges on the defensive, completely mocking their underlying unspoken fear of his unrestrained, catastrophic power. From there, the philosophical clash of the trial just exploded into full view. Bael demanded Belial return to the demon realm, arguing from the authority of first kingship. Basically, Bael leaned heavily on his elder status, ancient order, and his literal rank in the old manuscripts. But Belial? Belial countered this entirely. He championed the sovereign flame, which is power completely unchecked. He challenged Bael directly, essentially asking, does being first truly mean being greatest, or does it just mean your name was written down earlier in a dusty book? Belial argued that true sovereignty means acting without needing lesser bargains, or treaties, or the permission of an ancient hierarchy. It was the ultimate timeless debate: institutional, structural authority versus raw, absolute power. To break this intense deadlock, Ilyan Marr finally took the stand. Now, knowing he couldn't possibly overpower Belial, and knowing that begging would just invite absolute disgust, Ilyan cleverly targeted Belial's ultimate weakness, his pride. Ilyan pointed out that if Belial stayed, the mortal world wouldn't revere him. It would merely dilute his magnificent pride. Lower-ranked demons would just sell his terror in smaller bottles. Human rulers would use his name as cheap leverage to frighten their political neighbors. He would be turned into nothing more than priestly warnings to scare children, claimed by cowards as divine favor, and ultimately reduced to mere rumor, policy, and petty propaganda. Ilyan argued that remaining in the mortal realm wouldn't cement Belial's majesty at all. It would commercialize it. It would cheapen the sovereign flame.
And you know what? That brilliant argument actually made Belial's pride pause. He hesitated. And in that tiny, crucial pause, Paimon swooped in and constructed a highly elegant resolution. Paimon built a step-by-step recall where every single high crown played a specific role, effectively giving Belial's absolute power a ceremonial cage that he could tolerate. Purson would carry the memory, ensuring the erasure of the nation wasn't just left as an empty silence. Andromalius would carry the accounting, so the violent act wasn't just excused away. Vine would bind the borders to stop human madness from spreading. And Bael's role? To simply stand first, without making the entire recall about his own ego. By weaving everyone's pride together like that, Paimon created a masterful diplomatic net that Belial could accept without feeling like he was submitting to any single rival. As the higher crowns finally touched the human world to enforce this elegant recall, it didn't look like a chaotic cosmic war. There were no skies splitting open, no rain of fire. Instead, human rulers sitting in their tense council chambers suddenly, inexplicably, forgot the exact wording of the dark bargains they were planning. Lower-ranked demons who had been scrambling to capitalize on the wake of Belial's terror suddenly felt his shadow become far, far too heavy to carry, and they literally fled from altars and mirrors. The mortal world slowly, collectively, began to exhale as the suffocating pressure of that raw, supernatural dread was systematically and quietly disassembled. But, of course, Belial refused to return as a defeated prisoner. A crown dragged home in chains just becomes a pathetic story for lesser mouths to gossip about. So he's set one final, dangerous condition. Ilyan Marr keeps the Ember. Not to use as a weapon of mass conquest, mind you, and certainly not as permission to speak in Belial's name, but simply as living proof that persuasion once turned absolute wrath aside. It was a terrifying testament to his sovereignty, intentionally leaving a literal piece of absolute, unchecked power walking around in a fragile mortal vessel.
From my perspective as the observer of hidden truths, I supported this condition, but I absolutely had to add a vital ethical boundary to maintain some semblance of cosmic order. Ilyan would not own this absolute power. Rather, he would be constantly, endlessly tested by it. The Ember must not answer to greedy command. It must answer only to discernment, restraint, and the absolute refusal to kneel before fear. And really, this perfectly encapsulates the ethical tension of the entire narrative we've been discussing. Holding power isn't about dominion or control. It is an endless, highly dangerous test of one's own morality and one's own restraint. So, with all the terms finally set, Belial crossed back through the gate of old names, returning his distinct apocalyptic brand of danger behind ancient walls. He left behind a mortal world that could finally exhale, finally free from the threat of immediate random obliteration. But analytically speaking, he returned to a demon realm that could not exhale. By withdrawing strictly on his own terms and leaving that ember behind on Earth, he ensured that the political factions of the High Crowns would continue to silently war over what his recall truly meant for the balance of power. We conclude our explainer today with Ilyan Marr, who now carries the incredibly heavy burden of that ember. As desperate, terrified human refugees gather around him, looking for a brand new savior to protect them, Ilyan issues a stark, chilling warning. The first lesson is this: do not worship what saved you once. He flat out refuses to let his new followers build a prison of belief around him. And that leaves us to ponder a really dark intersection of power and morality. As a society, when we are desperate for survival and terrified of the unknown, can we ever truly resist the dangerous temptation of clinging to absolute, unaccountable power? It's a profound question, and one that lingers long, long after the glass plane has emptied. Thank you for joining me and uncovering these hidden truths today. Keep questioning, keep analyzing, and I'll see you in the next explainer.